Mountain Moving, since you're here tonight. Come back next week. Soraya Carroll. I guess she got a wonderful band. And she'll be here a little later. There will be a surprise celebrity here for the first part of the evening next Saturday. So you got to come see that. On the 21st, Helen Roster and Diana Laffey. Yeah, so come here now. Saturday the 28th, Musica Femina. It's a flute classical guitar duo. And you can read more about it on the schedule for yourself. I don't need to tell you everything. So tonight's program is, as you know, Lesbian Herstory Storytelling. It's going to be mostly local stories, but not all local stories. We're going to span about 40-something years. This is a benefit for the Lesbian Herstory Archives in New York. And we also have some local archival facilities through our library and some other things. I'm going to be telling you a lot more about it as the evening goes on. When you came in, you signed in on a little yellow sheet about how old you are and how many years out, and I haven't even finished tabulating it yet, and women are still coming in, but just, I'll give you updates as we go, but just from that first piece of paper, we are collectively 1,830 years old, and collectively, we have 659 lesbian years. If you like numbers, I think that's kind of neat. Our first storyteller is from Florida. She's 65 years old. She's been a lesbian for 50 years. She lives in St. Augustine, Florida, which is an all-lesbian residential community. She lives a very happy life with her, she describes lesbian come lately lover. Marilyn Murphy, the author of Are You Girls Traveling Alone? A wonderful book. I'll give you a little book plug. And so now I bring you Irene Weiss.
Hi, everybody. By the time I went into nurses training at the age of 18 or 19, I knew I was a lesbian. Even though I didn't use that word very much about myself, I thought of myself as gay. This was in 1945 when I went into nurses training. And I had always wanted to be a nurse since I was a young child until my teens when I realized that I was indeed attracted to women. And at that time, all I knew about being a lesbian was that it was bad. And everything I read told me that it was bad. So since I didn't want to be a bad person, I decided that I would not live a lesbian life, and that would prevent me from going into nurses training because I felt sure that if I was closeted with all those women, I would act out my lesbian desires. And fortunately, a friend of the family persuaded me to go into nurses training after all, and indeed my worst and best fears came true. Like the first night I was there. But that's another story. The story I want to tell you is about my last year in nurses training, when I was not far from graduating, and I lived in the nurses' residence, which was away from home, and I fell in love with one of my patients, and I just did my best to make her fall in love with me, and it worked. We did become lovers after she was not my patient anymore, and she went home. She was married, she had 2 young children. I can remember their names, Stuart and Myrna. And I worked the night night shift, and when Phyllis went home, I used to come and visit her in the morning after I got off duty. And Phyllis and I spent the day in bed, and I don't know what Stuart and Myrna did. They must have managed. They did grow up eventually. In the evening when her husband came home, we all had dinner together. And I was a bona fide good friend of the family. It got very hot affair. It got very intense. And I graduated from nurses training about that time, and my mother wanted to have a graduation party for me. Knowing of my friendship with Phyllis, she told me that she wasn't going to invite Phyllis to the party because she thought our friendship was not good. Not good for me and not good for Phyllis. Even though my mother presumably knew nothing, she certainly said to me at one point, I don't think it's good for you to be friends with a married woman. Sometimes a single woman can come between a married woman and her husband. And I didn't ask her what that meant. But since she said she wasn't inviting Phyllis to the party, I made a big scene about if you can't accept my friends, then I'm not going to come home and visit and whatnot. So I was sort of mildly alienated from my family for the time being. I did graduate. My mother changed her mind and invited Phyllis to my graduation party. A few months passed by, and I went to work as a graduate nurse in a local hospital when I lived in a nurse's residence where I lived in my own room. I got a phone call one night about 2 a.m., and it was Phyllis. Phyllis had told her husband that night that she was no longer in love with him, that she loved someone else, and that it was me she loved. And he threw her out in the street in her nightgown, and she had nowhere to go. So I got out of bed and got dressed, and I went and picked her up, and I brought her back, and I sneaked her into the residence, into my room, where, of course, she wasn't supposed to be. And she was there for about 3 days, and I brought her food from the cafeteria, and we had wonderful nights together for about 3 or 4 nights, and she was there, totally hidden. And then I got another phone call. My life seemed to revolve around phone calls those days. And it was Phyllis's father, not her husband, but her father, who wanted to know if Phyllis was with me. And I said, yes, and she's not coming home. And I had no idea what I expected to do with Phyllis in the nurse's residence. He said, well, he just wanted to speak to her. And I said, well, if she wants to speak with you, that's okay. So they arranged that she would walk outside the residence grounds and he would pull up and speak to her. Well, what he did was he literally kidnapped her. He grabbed her off the pavement, threw her in the car, and took her away, and sort of imprisoned her in her home. And the next thing I knew, the next day I got a phone call from the director of nurses who said that she had had a phone call, again, the telephone, from some man who told her that I had seduced his daughter and that we were unnatural people together, and that he intended to keep his daughter confined, and that unless she terminated my position, he would make all this information public. Now, he happened to be the owner of a small local newspaper, so it was pretty serious stuff. The director of nurses, who was everybody's idea of a maiden lady, very tall, very thin, snow-white hair. I'm not sure no one had ever laid a carnal hand on her body in her entire 60-some years. She was shocked because I admitted that what he said was true, that we were indeed lovers, that I had indeed seduced her, and there was nothing more to be done about it. She offered to have me see the staff psychiatrist, and fortunately I knew enough to say no. She offered to let me resign rather than terminate me. She said she couldn't keep me any longer. So I gave her an official resignation, which was to take place within 2 weeks. And the next day, another phone call from my father this time saying, why haven't you been home to visit? What's wrong? Some strange man called here and said some weird things about you. What's going on? So I said, well, that strange man is Phyllis's father, and I'll tell you what's going on. I want you to call all the family, and we're a big family, had some aunts and uncles, and ask them to come over Sunday, and I'll come home and tell you what's going on. So in front of the entire family, minus only my brother, who I don't know where he was, I told them that in the only words I knew how to say it at the time, that I loved Phyllis the way men love women, and that we were lovers together, and that's what her father had been trying to tell them. Then I told them what had happened at the hospital, but I was in effect through working there. And my mother burst into tears. My father said some pretty terrible things to me, like, why didn't you just keep walking down to the river instead of coming home and telling us this? And then he said something that resounded in my brain for years and years. He said, how could you not control your animal appetites? He didn't say, how come you're a lesbian? Or, any of that. He just said, why could you not control yourself? Which I thought was an interesting statement. Anyway, I told them that I was going to move to New York, and they agreed that I should move. That I would be better off not disgracing the family in Pittsburgh. And so I put an application into Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. And before I heard back from the hospital in New York, my time was up where I'd been working. And I went home to stay for a few days before I left town. And by that time, my mother had changed her mind that I needed to leave town, and she told me that, if I simply wanted to stay at home with her and not ever go out, she would see that no one ever knew, and she would protect me and take care of me, and I could stay at home and help her with the housework, and that sort of thing. I don't know if any of you ever seen a movie called Hiroshima, Mon Amour? Where the young woman who collaborates with the Germans and has a German lover has her head shaved and then is incarcerated in the cellar by her parents because she's such a disgrace. Well, when I saw that movie a few years later in New York, I thought that's exactly what my family wanted to do to me. They were willing to imprison me in the house so that no one would know what I was really like. But I turned down that wonderful offer. And I said I was going to move to New York. Well, secretly, I had been wanting to get to Greenwich Village all my life. And that's what I did. I moved to New York and began working at Mount Sinai Hospital there and hanging out in the village, which is another story. I heard from Phyllis about 6 months later. She phoned me and said that she was now being allowed by her husband and her father to do things by herself and that she could meet me in Atlantic City for a weekend, which we did. And we talked about our lives together. It was clear she wasn't ready to leave her husband yet. And I had found out so many other things and so many other women in the village that, Phyllis was past history by this time. Sounds terrible, doesn't it? But I was young, you'll have to remember that. So I went on and led my life, and about 30 years later, Phyllis found me again in Los Angeles. I had a phone call from her one day, and she had indeed left her husband, had another lesbian lover, and had been living with her for about 20 years. I call that a success story by anybody's life. Thank you.
Before we continue, we found some keys, I don't know where. It's a bunch of keys, there's a whistle on it, there's a car key for a Honda automobile. They're your keys, come get them. Also, you may have noticed that we're videotaping this event. A copy of the videotape will go to Lesbian Herstory Archives, a copy for River Hard Library. Anybody who's interested, I think we could probably arrange that you can have a copy of the tape. I don't know how much it'll cost, but I understand that these technologies exist. So if you're interested, we can arrange that. There will be no audience shots. Some of the storytellers have requested not to be on the video. That's real okay. The next story is the story of Michaeline Chattal. She's a local girl. She's a lifelong Chicagoan. She's She said to tell you that she's 44 years old. She's been queer for 30 years. She can't be here tonight herself. Her story is going to be read by Shel Bannister, who's her friend and also a local girl. And please welcome Shel.
I'm honored to be able to read Michaeline's story to you tonight. So now I'm Michaeline. I started high school at age 14 in 1962 at Notre Dame School for Girls around Central and Belmont. And right away, I met this very beautiful redhead. And I was just smitten with her. I had known before that I had these funny feelings, but growing up Catholic, funny feelings like that were very simple. Of course, you don't talk about it. You don't try to find out about it. You don't think anybody else is like that. At least I didn't. I didn't think anybody else was like that except this one girl, Marguerite. We had a great relationship freshman year, but then she got kicked out of school as a result. Our teacher caught some notes that we wrote back and forth. Our parents got called. I don't remember what was said. Nothing happened to me, but she got zapped out of school. Her parents sent her to a boarding school in Iowa somewhere. I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and received no reply. Years later, 12 years later, I came to find out that all of her mail had been censored. But at the time, I thought she hated me and never wanted to see me again. Nobody knew why she was zapped out of school. Everybody thought she was pregnant or something. Right. But I never said a thing. This was the start of my actively, well, I don't really know what to call it, my pursuing girls. Consciously, I didn't call it anything. Maybe queer. Nobody I knew used the word lesbian. I just never heard it. Dyke I'd heard. I heard dyke, but that was a bad word. In my second year then, I met who I thought was the love of my life, Clarice. Clarice and I, we had a friend with a car, and we had these phony baloney IDs, and we'd go to a bar in Calumet City called The Club. I was with her for 2 years, sophomore and junior years, and the two of us started hanging out with other queers during that time. Of course, she was the femme. She'd wear these little femme dresses. We'd go to the bar and dance together. Of course, I was super butch. I lit cigarettes for her, opened doors, walked on the curbside of the street, the whole bit. At least during the courtship I did. I did that with all my girlfriends. And it took me a long time to get out of that, because it was a courtesy thing. I'd buy 2 tickets for the movies. You know, I'd walk up and say, 2, please. And here was my girlfriend, standing right there and everything. Always made me feel real obvious. I dressed real butch, too. And of course, when we went to the bars, I was always dressed to the nines. I wore nice tailored shirts, black pants, and black socks. But you know, I was living with my parents, and I had to be a little cool, so I always carried my black socks with me in my pockets. And I'd change in the car. And there was none of this unisex clothing then either. The girls had to be girls' shirts, you know, buttoned on the right side because you could get kicked out of the bar if you didn't wear that kind of girl's shirt. It happened to me once. I was very shocked. I didn't even know about that stuff. I guess because all the baseball dykes I hung out with wore sweatshirts. I never realized there was a real reason for that. It was so they didn't have to deal with the button business. We met all kinds of women there in the bar. They were passing women. Women who bound their breasts and passed for men on their job and everything. They were so cool. I thought it was so cool that they were out doing that in the world. That was a real eye-opener. And that's how it was then. We didn't talk about things, or places, or anything. We never used the L word. You just went to these places. And they were queer places, and you did queer things. And everybody hated you outside of the bar. You weren't approved of anywhere. Mostly, though, we spent time in each other's houses. Clarice would try to femme me up to be around her family. She'd go, Mike, why don't you wear a little makeup? Why don't you wear this shirt or this sweater? I didn't, of course. My mother's house was so small, everything was really crammed together. I shared a bedroom with my sister Dorothy, who was a few years younger. This room that we shared had 2 twin beds shoved together. It was really small. So this one night, Clarice was staying over, and we were laying in the bed by the wall. We're kissing and hugging and doing all this other stuff, and Dorothy's sleeping away on the other bed. All of a sudden, Dorothy falls out of bed, just like that. Boom. And Clarice and I were like, oh my God. So of course we pretended we were asleep, and Dorothy gets back in bed, and we go, what happened? What happened? Like it was her who woke us up. I don't even remember if she said anything to us. So the next day, Dorothy doesn't talk to me very much. And it seemed like a lifetime went by. One time we're sitting on the floor in front of the TV. I don't know if I said something to her or if it was just time for her to speak up, but she said, you know, you better stop doing what you're doing or I'm going to tell Mom. And I never found out what she knew or what she heard or what she saw or anything. And it was never spoken of again. Of course, Clarice and I watched our P's and Q's from then on, and today Dorothy doesn't even remember that incident. Here I lived in fear for years because I thought she was going to blow the whistle on me, and now she's queer too. Wish I had a sister like that from son. Okay, years later, Dorothy was the one who introduced me to these other things that were starting to happen. Rap groups, stuff like that. And I thought it was so fantastic. Lesbians getting together to talk about being queer or to talk about issues. I thought it was great. Women out there doing something besides going to the bars. But I still went to the bars myself. I guess I didn't feel like I had opinions or anything. So I couldn't join those activities. But I wanted to know about it. Before that, all I can remember for myself was hiding. Hiding from my family and lying as much as I could about where I was going and who I was going with. And all that time, we didn't say what anything was. It just was.
No? Okay. I don't want to step on anybody's feelings because this is an obituary. Tell me what's missing out of here. Sarah Esther Feldman, beloved daughter of the late Isadora and Minnie, loving sister of Sam, who married Beatrice, Gertrude Kravitz, who married the late Irving, Bernard, who married Frances, and the late William, who married the late Peggy, Albert, who survived his wives Helen and Sylvia, and Julie, who was married to the late Don Clemento. So you know she was not a kid. Many loving nieces and nephews, period. I think there's something missing out of here. And that's a lot why we're here tonight, so we don't get erased like that anymore. The next storyteller I want. How you doing? Great. Good. Pat McCombs is a lifelong Chicagoan, and she has been involved in the lesbian movement since birth. And I'm not sure if she meant her own birth or the movement's birth. Maybe, I don't know, maybe both, yeah. She's currently a frustrated poet, and she's also currently produces lesbian parties with Executive Suite Productions. Please welcome Pat McCombs.
Thank you. Hello there. This is my first time doing something like this. I'm a little nervous, but not that nervous because I do like to talk. Well, I'm going to talk about, this was in the late 70s. A group of friends of mine, we got together. We were talking on the phone, and so they said to me, girl, did you hear about what happened in CK's? I said, no, what happened? Do you know they wouldn't let the black girls in? They were asking them for 3 or 4 IDs and a green card. I said, a green card? They said, yeah, public aid ID or a passport. I said, what? So I was really pissed off, and so I was talking to a girlfriend of mine, Harriet, and I said to her, you know, this pisses me off. I said, I'm so sick of that shit every time we go to a bar or we hear about different things, and we never do anything about it. I said, let's do something about it. She said, well, what can we do? I said, well, let's form an organization. So I said, because we don't have a black organization, so let's do something. So we came up with this name, we dibbled it down, and I said, I wanted to sound really, you know, important, like we're really a big group. So we came up with this name, the Black Lesbian Discrimination Investigative Committee. So we were the BLDIC, right? So I called up a few friends. I said, you know what we're gonna do? Let's picket that bar. This was like 8, 7, 9, something. I said, we're gonna picket that bar. I said, because I'm sick of this shit. So I got a group of friends, and I had a party over at my house, and we made posters and signs and different things. I said, we're going up to that bar on a Friday night. I said, because that's when a lot of white girls come from the suburbs. And they'll be afraid to see a bunch of black folks up on that bar. I said, so what we did is I wrote this letter, this open letter that I passed out among the people going in the bar, and it states, it happens time and time again, black women must endure constant discriminatory acts from various bars within the gay community. And I have this long explanation, and some of the reasons why we were picketing, so people would constantly ask us, so we gave out little pamphlets like this. And I said, they asked for our marriage certificate or a passport. And black women in groups of 3 or 4, after admitting 1 or 2, they wouldn't let the other 2 in, so consequently you wouldn't want to go in because your friends didn't get in. Sisters were asked for a public aid agency or identification card, green card. And 2 sisters were asked to leave the bar after they had been admitted to the bar because they said they didn't buy enough drinks. Okay? So during this time, I also was doing volunteer work at the Lesbian Community Center on Sheffield. So that became like our pseudo headquarters. Because like I say, the Black Lesbian Discrimination Investigative Committee was only really 2 people. But they didn't know that. So then more and more people got concerned, and we had quite a few white women to respond and help us out. Matter of fact, one while it was in the rain one Friday, it was more white women in the line than black, so I felt real good. Then the next leaflet I gave out was our purpose, which we figured that out sitting down thinking about it over a couple of years at the time. I said, what is our purpose? What do we plan to do? And why not just continue patronizing that particular bar? And one of the reasons I said our purpose is to live, visit, work, and socialize within the gay community and expect the same rights as white women with the same lifestyles as ours. And we will continue to, not only discontinue to patronize discrimination from various bars, but we would let the Liquor Commission know about what was going on, which is what we did next. Now, because I was in the closet, deep in the closet, at the time, I used the name Pat Love when people would call, because Gay Life wrote an article about the incident, and they wanted a spokesperson. Well, there was only 2 of us, like I said. So I would answer the phone at the Lesbian Community Center, and when they asked about the black demonstration, then I was there to tell them about the Black Lesbian Discrimination Investigative Committee. So I did give out a handout on where people could report the various incidences of discrimination, and also we let the various bars know that we would have an investigative team which would frequent their places periodically. Which, you know the team, don't you? So it got so bad, well, Augie and CK, she's gone now, informed us of a meeting. They agreed to meet us at the Human Relations Office, where we had a meeting with AUGA and CK to work out the various differences about the policy at the door for ID. And so we had a real good meeting. These are little handouts. I had a news release. It's too much to read right now. But Rennie Hanover was the attorney for the BLTIC. She was a personal friend of mine, so she just jumped on the bandwagon and helped us out quite a bit. And some of the things that did come up was also the 1975 case when they picketed, what was that? Not August, yeah. So that came out of it. And so what happened is that we had more women to become involved, more black women become involved. And we started going to the bars and everybody thought we were going to constantly be investigated. So it worked out pretty good. But the only thing about it, people would call up and ask for speakers for the Black Lesbian Discrimination Investigative Committee because there was no committees for black women. So we had to be the spokesperson for the organization, and they wanted us to travel around. That's when we sort of dissolved, because like I said, I was in the closet. So, but other than that, that's about as political as I got during that time. But it was an experience that I wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Oh, we got some great stories, huh? And for all these wonderful stories that we're hearing, there's thousands more. There's more than 100 of us here tonight. And everybody's got a story. I wish we had time for all of us. The next story to tell her that you're going to hear is Lorraine Harris. She's a lifelong Chicagoan too. I asked her how she wanted me to introduce her. She said, "Oh, introduce me as Nancy Reagan." So here she is, Nancy Reagan, Lorraine Harris.
Well, the reason I chose Nancy was because I know she envies me. My freedom. I'm going to read something out of my little book here that I wrote in 1988. But just as a little explanation about it, it's about my first, love affair. And I went to Josephine High School in 1948. I started there in 48. And I really don't remember any language that we had. I remember there was the word fruits and queer and berry. Those were like different words that we used, but at the time and at the age that I was there, I don't know what I knew about sexuality at all, really, to tell you the truth. And I did have some idea that, it meant two women together somehow, or two men. But sometimes, because I was in the sports in my grammar school, we would call people fairies. They meant they weren't part of the, I guess you call them jocks nowadays. So I don't know what I really meant, but I had some vague notion about the meaning of these words. And something else I can tell you is that I found out about myself through my life that I've never loved anyone that I stopped loving, ever in my entire life. I've never had my love turn into hate. I guess that deserves a hand. So I'm starting this with the sewing class of 1948. I remember that young girl that I was, with her uniform and her large blue eyes, and those strange old hairdos with her rich dark hair. I remember her, and I love her, and so did you. I also remember another girl with beautiful green eyes, with dark shining black hair. I remember her lips touching mine, giving kisses in the locker room. I remember joy and the lust with which she participated. I remember the curve of her breasts in her jacket. I remember how much I enjoyed looking at her body and her uniform. I remember her legs and running my hand up under her skirt. I remember her picture in a black bathing suit taken on the beach in Chesterton, Indiana. How it excited me then. I can see it now in my mind's eye. I feel her kiss me in her hallway. I feel her kiss me as we babysat. Well, she was babysitting, and I was visiting her, and pretending I was asleep on the floor. But I remember the excitement her closeness filled my body with as I lay there. I remember holding hands while we watched movies in our school auditorium. I remember walking with you in the rain, close together under the umbrella. I remember kissing your beautiful pussy on your black porch, or your back porch, rather. I remember coming to St. Elizabeth's Hospital. You had an ingrown hair somewhere in your behind, and I walked up 11 flights of stairs to see you when I pleased, even late after visiting hours. I remember my hand under your sheet, touching your pussy, holding it, rubbing it, loving it, and you enjoying it. So in love with you was I. I remember the sewing room when I first was told I had to sit next to you. And I remember saying, oh no, not next to that fruitcake or fairy or something like that. It was an adjective commonly used to mean gay, but I don't think I meant it. I meant what we mean now as square. I remembered you saying to me in the hospital, Lorraine, we're lesbians, or queers. I can't remember the exact word you used, but I think it was lesbians. I hadn't thought of it, but with my hand on your pussy, and a smile on my face, and a look of concern on your face, my hand still on your pussy, your look of concern turning to pleasure as I played with you, I said, yes, I guess we are. I love you, and I'll shout it from the rooftops. And I remember visualizing myself doing just that. I wasn't ashamed of loving you then, nor am I now. I remember our love letters and talking to you for hours at night on the telephone. Two lovers unable to stay apart. Walking in Humboldt Park, going into the bathroom and kissing. Kissing at the theater on Armitage. Walking in Lincoln Park, kissing in that bathroom. You talking about cutting your hair short and being a boy. And me being surprised you wanted to be the boy because I thought I was the boy. And you were the girl. But your wanting to be the boy still excited me. I remembered you remarking to me how beautiful Olga Soho was and how sexy she was. How that excited me, that you thought she was sexy. I told you, so do I think she's sexy. And it made me a little jealous too, although I didn't think either one of us had a chance. Chauvinist that I was confident. If there was a chance, I could win her heart. But it kind of scared me that you might want her and leave me. Still, I was confident that you wouldn't try to get her. I remember the look on your face as you told me. It was hot, lustful. I loved it. Your soft, thick lips, I remember them now. Your breast cupped in my hand, your body crushed against mine. You told me often and over again that you loved me. I remember calling you at wards. I remember you saying to me, let's just be friends. This was after we had graduated from high school. I said, we are friends. And you said, no, just friends. I remember my heart breaking and so much more that happened after that. What happened? You never told me. We got caught by your mom finding our letters in your drawer, and we were forbidden to see each other, but still we met. What happened? What do you remember? Have you ever had another affair with a woman? You kissed me. I fantasized about kissing you, but I didn't have the nerve. You had the nerve. Have you told your husband about us? It was bold of you to kiss me. I remember being jealous. I remember you being jealous and possessive of me, Jean. I loved you then. I love you now. 1988, 40 years later. I remember, ich liebe dich mit all mein Herzen. What do you remember? And that was my high school experience. I want to just tell you a little bit about my bars, because after all this happened to me, I went through a series of experiences, and finally I decided there was just no point in resisting my lesbian self. And I had worked at the telephone company while I was going to school, and a lot of those women told me of different bars. One bar they mentioned was Big Lou's on North Avenue near Halsted, which was very rough, they said. But they also mentioned the Midget Inn. I found out just recently on Kedzie near Montrose. And so finally one night, I think after seeing Oedipus Rex, I got on a bus and went out to the Midget Inn. And this was my first gay bar. I walked into it, and on the first level, it was like a regular bar with the lights all on. There were men in there, I think, watching television. I'm not sure. It seems to me they used to have televisions even then in the bars. And I said, am I in the right place? And they said, yes, just go up through the stairs. And I went up the stairs and through these curtains, and there I was, as far as I'm concerned, in heaven. All these women, it was very dark, and the music, the jukebox was playing, and the women were dancing. And I met a woman that night and went home with her and another couple. And I guess the young woman didn't want to have sex with me because she was afraid of bringing me out, which was a lot of lesbians years ago used to have that thought. They didn't want to bring people out for some reason. I never could understand it, but I assured her that I had had sex already, and she wasn't bringing me out. And it took a while, but I convinced her in any case. And I don't even know if I went home that weekend. But, so there were a lot of bars, and I just kind of would like to mention them. The one was this Midget Inn. I didn't know who owned it. Maybe it was owned by men, I'm not sure. A lot of bars that were gay were owned by the mafia in those days. And also, everybody was kind of like butch or femme, and like the other young lady said, or a young woman said, if you weren't butch or you weren't femme, you could really have some problems. And I wasn't. I wasn't butch and I wasn't femme. And so everybody used to always ask me, what are you, Which I thought was an unusual question in that bar. So what are you, and whatever they were, it didn't matter to me. So there was a 2230 club, and that was on Lincoln Avenue. And then there was a Dude Ranch on State Street. And then the volleyball, which I know that was run by the mafia. And something about these is like you would go into these places and you would meet women there, but mostly you would only know each other's first names. You wouldn't know their last names. You might know what kind of work they do, but you might not even know that. You might not even exchange that with each other. You just dance and party and do whatever you could. But now it seems so different. I know I work for Outlines and I sell advertising for Outlines. And when I first went into the office and started working there, I used to cry day after day thinking, the freedom that we have now, as far as, look at this, I mean, a whole group of lesbians, my God, it's just like marvelous. So, in any case, there's my little story to add to the her story. And if anyone knows those bars, I'd like to talk to them. Or if anyone went to Josephine High School, I'd like to talk to them. Well, have a good night.
videos, walk around, take a look. The next storyteller, this is September, this is not supposed to happen as well. So it goes. The next story is Adrian Smith's story. And Adrian Smith is a lesbian feminist therapist. She's been out for a long time. She told me how many years, I don't remember. She can't be with us tonight, but her story is going to be read by Sarah Hoagland, who's a local girl. Take a look at her t-shirt, will you? Please. Welcome, Sarah Hoagland.
You can't see the t-shirt, it's the second Michigan Women's Music Festival t-shirt. Completely with cold. This is Adrian Smith's story. I came out in 1959. I was 25 years old. I saw this woman at a meeting who just intrigued me. At the time, I was living with a roommate, and she hosted a meeting at our house. It was a meeting of the UJA, the United Jewish Appeal. I wasn't really involved with it. I was just hanging around when I saw this woman. Her name was Darlene. And a few days later, she called on the phone. There was something about a coffee pot. I think she had brought a coffee pot over for the meeting. So I decided to go over and return the coffee pot to her. I don't think I left her apartment for days after that. It was very funny because it was the first woman I met, and we spent 15 years together. She was 2 years older than me. She was 27. She had experience as a lesbian already, and she'd just been to New York. She told me all these wonderful stories. I was completely intrigued. I just sat there and listened with my mouth open. I remember we were sitting in Maury's, that was a delicatessen on Broadway, and I just sat there for hours entranced, listening to her talk about this world I never knew existed. I think I was aware before that something was weird about me. I wasn't particularly attracted to guys. I thought maybe I was a failure as a social butterfly. But it never occurred to me that I was a lesbian. So Darlene and I knew each other for about a week before I moved in with her. And it lasted 15 years. Not a bad record. For a long time, we knew maybe only a handful of other lesbians and gays. She worked at a bookstore where there were other lesbians. And I started graduate school at the University of Chicago the next year, and I met a couple of people there. There was this couple that Darlene worked for, and we socialized with them. We used to go out to their cottage very often. It was real clear that they were lesbians, but I don't think the word was ever used. They were in their 60s at that point, and they'd been together for 25 or 30 years. I'm not sure if they ever used the word lesbian, but it was very obvious that they were, and we were, and we all knew. Basically, the years before Stonewall were a time of being very secretive. I was even secretive with myself. I mean, a lot of times I just said, well, I'm not really a lesbian, I just happen to be with a woman. It took me a long time to recognize that, yes, I am a lesbian. There was a lot of feeling that there was something very wrong with me, and I should get it fixed. I went to a lot of different therapists. And I always say that it was the women's movement that cured me. Suddenly I became sane, and it was them out there that weren't. The women's movement and the gay liberation movement were what made me feel better. I was working as a psychologist, and as I became more active and involved in the movement, I became more and more out professionally. In 1974, I was invited to be a panelist on the David Susskind Show, which was one of the first TV talk shows. It was done in New York and shown nationally. This was going to be a show on homosexuality, and there were 6 of us on the panel, 3 lesbians, 3 gay men, all of us professionals in various fields. Susskind did one homosexual show a year, and it was basically
did this show and tell thing so people would see we didn't have horns and tail. And the night before I was supposed to fly to New York to be on the show, I knew something was wrong because I couldn't sleep. I kept pacing and pacing, and finally I said, oh my God, I've got to tell my mother. And she's in California, you know, so I pick up the phone. And I said, I don't know exactly what I said to her, but it was something like, well, you know, thinking about Darlene and me, well, you know, I got to tell you, I'm going to be on the Susskind show. It's about Darlene and me, and, you know, I'm a lesbian. My mother says, I've known it for years what took you so long to tell me. So I said, why didn't you say something? And she said, well, it wasn't my place to say it. And she was absolutely right. Then Darlene decided to tell her mother, and she wanted me to come with her. She didn't want to do it by herself. So we took her out to dinner in a restaurant, and we did all the taking off of coats and sitting down, and finally there was no more putting it off. And Darlene said, Adrienne just came back from New York. And her mother said, what was Adrienne doing in New York? Well, she was on the Susskind show. And her mother turned to me and said, what were you doing on the Susskind show? I said, there was a show on homosexuality. We're homosexuals. And her mother says, no, you're not. You're lesbians, homosexuals are men. It was so sad that we felt so scared and so untrusting, especially with Darlene's mother, because she had known for 20 years and they had never talked about it. In the years before the movement, I didn't really talk about being a lesbian at all, except maybe with Darlene. It's possible that I was much more closeted than other women. I really don't know. I didn't talk about our relationship with anyone else, ever. That's part of what was difficult. There were no confidants. It becomes very ingrown. If you were having trouble with a lover, that same lover was the only one you could talk to about it. So she and I were each other's only confidant, only best friend, only everything else. And what happened was that with the coming of the women's movement, there were other options. And so the relationship, which had been essential until then, lost that quality. And I think at that point, there were enough differences between us that without the desperateness, it couldn't survive. To some extent, the relationship was held together by this feeling that there was nobody else out there, and I didn't dare go hunting and seeking. But then, like I say, maybe I was just particularly shy about these things. I'm glad it's different now.
Oh, I gotta tell you, I'm amazed. It's just wonderful. I realized that I forgot to tell you who I am. My name is Mikhail Brody, and I'm a co-producer of this event, and my partner, Martha, she's around here someplace. There she is, she's right there. Please. We're going to take a break now, but before we do that, two things. One, very important, please bring your mugs back to the kitchen or we're going to run out during the break. And two, let me tell you a little bit about the exhibits and the displays that we have. The David Susskind show that Sarah Adrienne talked about, we have a tape of that show. It's right over there. It's pretty interesting. Actually, it's really boring to watch the whole thing, really, but a few minutes of it at a time. It's very interesting. We have another video. It's a little video from the Lesbian Herstory Archives. They talk about their program and what they're doing. Please take a look at it. There's also some literature from Lesbian Herstory Archives and some, you can sign up for their mailing list and you can send them even some more money. I have a display of Lavender Woman newspapers, which you may know was a lesbian newspaper that published in Chicago for 5 years from 1971 to 1976. Got almost a full set of papers. Take a look at it, kind of interesting. Also, I think for sale back there, yeah? For sale back there are copies of a book called Are We There Yet?, which is a continuing herstory of Lavender Woman newspaper. Take a look at it. I recommend it heartily. I wrote it. That's why. But I would recommend it anyway, because I really would. We also have a display of photographs, snapshots that a lot of them are from the 19-teens and 20s. I found them 20 years ago in a secondhand store laying on a table. I know these are lesbians. They got it with lesbians. They're really kind of neat snapshots. Go take a look at them. We have Hotwire has an exhibit. They got a photograph and a lot of neat stuff. Gerberhardt Library has a great display. Go check them out. They've just moved to new quarters, and they'll tell you where they're located and where their hours are. They've been here in Chicago for 10 years, and they're growing and getting wonderful now. We have the David Susskind video. We have some other books for sale. We've got a lot of stuff. So let's take a break.
Hello. It's been a long 21 years here in Chicago and another, I'd say about 5 in Alaska when I discovered that I was a lesbian. For 1 year, I thought I was, myself and my lover were the only lesbians around. It's a familiar thing that a lot of people here, we live in this isolation and you don't know. We met people finally in Fairbanks, Alaska, and the scene there was a university, so it was very closeted. We knew some gay men that we dated as a foursome, so, and we never even talked about it with them, but it was just like understood. Fairbanks is pretty small, about like 40,000 people in the surrounding area. So in the summers, I go down to Anchorage, and that's where I really first, well, I have to take it back. As a so-called straight person at 18, I went to a gay bar, and I didn't know it. So people took me there, and it turned out to be a show, much like the Baton here. And I didn't believe it. I had never been exposed to anything like this. And I think I was called queer when I was 13, and I know I had these crushes on women throughout high school. But I didn't know what it was, so we see these men singing Love for Sale and all that stuff. Yeah, pretty weird. It didn't affect me. It didn't sound like something that belonged to me. So naturally, after the big awakening the next year, I met some other women, and we went down to Anchorage, and we went to a bar called the Broken Mirror, and it was one of these dark places with little slivers of broken mirror on the outside, and it only became gay or a lesbian bar after midnight. Then most of the straight people would have gone home because we would all act like, well, everything's winding down. We just couldn't wait for them to leave, so we could lock the door and have it be a lesbian bar. Then when that would close, we'd go to some other clubs called the Brief Encounter, and I forget the name of the other, Starlight Club or something, and they were after hours, after 4 o'clock bars too. Things in Alaska, you know, they stay open till 8 in the morning, midnight sun and all that. So there was quite a crowd of women up there. Most of the ones I knew were into either being butch or femme, so what I got called was somebody sitting on the fence. They were trying to see which way I would go, and then, so the term was baby butch. You know, and you had to choose one or the other. Well, my lover and I, we didn't do that, so we did find other people who didn't do that either. But largely it was role-playing. There was no gay liberation. There was no women's liberation. Finally, there was some kind of consciousness-raising group at the university the year I left. But, so that was Alaska, and it there were baseball teams and people who had home parties, like someone else mentioned. The big thing was to have these home parties and dancing and just carrying on and letting yourself be who you were among your peers. That was the important thing. So when I got here to Chicago, it was just like, I couldn't believe it. I was here in the winter for 2 weeks, and I went to several bars. I don't know. One woman didn't mention the ones that I went to. The first one I went to was a lesbian bar. It was C'est La Vie on the corner of Lawrence and there's a Burger King there right now. It's around Damon, somewhere over that way west. And it was full of blacklight posters with men and women in sexual poses, and you know, it was pretty something else. And then there's another one called Cookies or JoJo's on the south side of Cermak in Francisco, I believe. And other than that, it started to go to places like bars that would only be a lesbian night on Monday nights to coincide with the Chicago Lesbian Liberation. I think that's around the time that I met Nicole here at a demonstration down on the Civic Plaza, the Picasso. I couldn't believe all these women. It freaked me out because I think I was still wearing my hair in curls and, you know, a bra. And this was the time of the liberated 60s. So I couldn't believe it. Everybody was wearing these t-shirts. And, you know, it was very political, and this is very wonderful. We had opportunities to do things like go on TV too. We were on the Howard Miller Show, 1971. Yeah, I think I wore a wig and called myself Helen because I didn't want. I had an aunt and uncle in the city. I didn't care about my own family, but my aunt and uncle was one. So it was a very liberating thing, and I guess I've always thought I was going to leave Chicago, but this is a wonderful community, and I'm reading a book lately about lesbians in Nevada in the 1860s, and I thought, my God, by the time I came out in the 1960s, it still wasn't that much different, but it's taken another 20 years, and for those of you who are from some smaller areas, I'm really from Michigan. 20 years ago, it took something to take my lesbian friends up there with me and dance with them at the VFW Hall, but we did it. Thank you.
I forgot to tell you, Mary brought some photographs. They're back on the table. Take a look at them before you leave. She was looking her high school ID picture. Some very nice stuff. Let me tell you some announcements before we get going, because I forgot to do that before. I'm going to read you this flyer. Mickey and Con celebrate the birthdays. Okay, forget that. Let me start again. Celebrate the birthdays of Georgette Harper, lesbomania columnist, Paula Berg, playwright and songwriter, and Queen Hatshepsut. Am I saying that right? Wow. Queen Hatshepsut, the only woman pharaoh of Egypt. This event will be Wednesday, September 11th, 8 p.m. at Cairo. This is Illinois, after all. Cairo, 720 North Wells. The fun-filled festivities will include readings from Georgette's humor writings and maybe a song or two, excerpts from Paula's new lesbian musical, Connections of the Heart, starring the incomparable Diana Laffey. Shocking details of the lesbian love life of Queen Hatshepsut. Exciting door prizes and more, but that's not all. Following the Birthday Merriment Club, Goddess presents a benefit for the Lesbian Herstory Archives. Did we hear that? There's a couple of phone numbers here. See Nikki if you want more information. Yeah, okay. Let me tell you some numbers. Here's an update on our statistics for the evening. Our age range here this evening is 11 to 65. We got somewhere somewhere over 120 women have walked through that door this evening. We didn't get them all. Not everybody wrote themselves down. We collectively have a total of 3,987 years of living experience. And stretch a man for man, you know how far back that goes. We have 1,364 lesbian years between us. Let me say that number again, that's big. 1,364 lesbian years just in this room. And we average about 1/3 of our lives out as lesbians. That's the average for us collectively here this evening. The next storyteller is Renita Gray. And I don't think I need to tell you very much about Renita, but you know something, I could, because I've known Renita for a real long time. And when I threatened to do just that, she told me what she was going to tell on me. So without further ado, Renita Gray.
Hi, I'm Renita. And sex rule. I'm a lesbian separatist, and I've been a separatist since 1971. I came out as a lesbian in 1969 with Mikkel Brody, who at that time was Michelle Brody. I had met Michelle. Michelle was introduced to me by my fiance in 1967. And I told him right away when I first met her, I said, she is a pervert. How dare you introduce me to this pervert? I said, she's a lesbian. I could tell right away. It must be true, because 2 years later, I broke off with this guy who I haven't seen maybe once or twice in the last, I don't know, whatever number of years, and took up with Mikkel Brody. And she and I hung out in Hyde Park, and then we tripped off to Woodstock together. And while we were at Woodstock, according to Mikkel, we heard about gay liberation. And when we got back to Chicago, there was a newspaper in Chicago at that time called the Chicago Seed. And we put my phone number in the Chicago Seed. My phone number at that time was FBI LIST. And all you had to do was call the FBI list for any kind of lesbian or gay information, and me or Michelle. And over the next year, my house and Michelle's house became like a crash pad for women and men who were coming out. Mostly I had women at my house, very rarely men. The men went to Michelle's house because she had a male roommate for a while. Until she came home one day and they were doing it in her bedroom. And then that ended up with the male roommate. After Michelle and I weren't girlfriends anymore, we were still friends, and we both just became really active in trying to organize a lesbian community around us. Because as you've heard many other women say, and we were the same, we felt like we were the only two lesbians around. And we started looking for other women who not only wanted to acknowledge themselves as lesbians, but as out lesbians. And our first button, I remember the first button we had, which said out of the closets and into the streets. And those were the kind of girls we were in the 60s. First bar I went to was called the King's Ransom. That was on Chicago Avenue. It was a small, mixed bar. But on Monday nights, it was lesbian night. There used to be a bar in Hyde Park called the Mark III. And it was a black lesbian bar, heavy-duty rolls, studs. Is my time up? Mark IV. The Mark IV. Stand corrected. The Mark IV. And nice-loving hippie types who was about Ann Layton size, came with me and we went to the market floor. Now this bar was full of studs and ladies, all black women. So my friend and I would go in the bar, looking around, and we're dressed in our androgynous hippie lesbian clothes, of course. And they say to us, well, what are you? We're like, we're guys, we're lesbians. Okay. My friend, of course, wants to dance with one of the most beautiful women in the bar, who of course happened to be someone else's lady. And she starts dancing with her, Peggy Iris. And of course her stud comes over to me since I was black and said, hey, what's she doing, my lady? And I'm like, oh, where is she? Just went, we don't play that here. I'm like, oh shit. Stop dancing. Let's go, okay? Peggy's like, you know, the woman was like big, okay? Peggy's like dancing, head of this woman's tits and everything, like really getting down. Her stud, of course, getting madder and madder at me. I said, Peggy, I'm leaving now. You leaving with me or what? Okay, this is the only time I've ever left a lesbian bar running. That is a true story from the 60s. We left there post haste. After that, most of the bars, I continued to be, and still consider myself a lesbian. I'm not very heavy into the role scene, even though everybody knows what my role really is. But, thank you, man. I came out as a separatist in the 70s, again with one other friend, Rayla, who's no longer living. And I think even my friends, even my good friend Michelle thought I was kind of crazy then. The idea of being a lesbian separatist in the early 70s was like just too far out. It was just inconceivable. People really couldn't understand what we were talking about. The whole thing of goddess worship and goddess love and lesbians really trying to do their own thing and breaking away from gay men was just not the thing in the early 70s. But it was the thing for me. And that was really, really what I wanted to do. And I really wanted to get together with other lesbians. Because at that point, the gay movement, any gay activity that you went to was primarily 1,000 gay boys and maybe 100 lesbians. And it was too difficult for us to really communicate and get together as women to work on our issues because the boys really dominated and their issues really took over. And we were just really kind of in the back of their thing. And it was at that time in the early 70s that Lavender Woman got going, which was a lesbian newspaper that I worked on, and a lesbian collective that I was in. The collective experience was another wonderful, unique lesbian experience of the 70s. Any of you who have ever been on the collective know just what I'm talking about? Sometimes I'm still shocked that I'm still a lesbian now. When I first came out, I thought, oh, this must be a phase I'm going through. It won't last. It'll pass in a while. Then I was like super femme, wore high heels. I would say to Brody, I would cry like, well, I'm a lesbian, do I have to give up my short skirts? I mean, what do I have to do? I don't wear short skirts anymore. Now I just stick with shorts. But the thing that really happened for me that was the most positive was that when I did come out as a lesbian, I had always wanted to be a writer. And I then began to write about my lesbian experience. And that, for me, has been really the greatest gift that being a lesbian has given me, and that this community has given me, because it's given me a voice and a way of mirroring myself and really seeing myself as very beautiful. And it really gave me a form and a way to really begin loving myself in a way that I really had not been able to love myself before I came out as a lesbian. Thank you.
Here comes Ella. Ella Seke. Many of you know her as a painter, and many of you know her as a wonderful bass player. But she's going to tell you about a previous incarnation as a drummer. Ella Seke.
Yes, I am a lesbian. Yes, and in true lesbian fashion, I'm picturing you all naked. Yes. Yeah, you like it, don't you? Oh, you look like me naked too. Okay. Well, okay. So this time period of my life was started in 1971, and I was coming to Chicago as a little baby lesbian. I was very young, about 2 years old. And I'd be coming into the meetings and everything, and on Monday nights, and I'd run into a woman named Linda Shear. And she, at that time, was a big separatist dyke, and that was really exciting, separatist politics. And she was a musician, and I was a musician also, but out in Aurora, where I lived for quite a few years, western suburb. About 40 miles from here, and I played rock and roll drums, heavy metal, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, right, with the boys, with the garage bands and basements and everything. And Linda says to me, well, how about let's try some music together? And I said, well, I go, boom, 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 and you do, I says, I don't know how this is going to work. So she comes to Aurora to check out my drum set, my Blue Pearl drum set, and my mom was very excited about this whole thing. These big honking lesbian dykes come into my house, come into the basement, and my mom's going, nice to meet you. So we go down there, I do my little rehearsing, and they go, oh cool, let's get together. So Linda and I get together. And we start playing around in little crappy bars in Chicago, Night Out, and all these other little joints that weren't queer, but we of course solicited all the lesbians to come. And we decided to go for a whole hog, we decided to go for this big mama concert, and we would call it Out of the Closet, Not at the Stage. It was going to be held at Circle Campus, and we thought, well, how many people could come, So we get this concert, I show up, Linda shows up, and so do 800 other people. And I'm going, fuck. I played at most in front of 25 people, right? I'm in front of 800 screaming lesbians and faggots, right? What am I good at? So I get on the stage and I'm like this. I sit down on my drums, thank God I was sitting down. And so Linda starts playing, and we could do this thing. And the third song was a drum solo, right? So I'm like, doing fucking that royal, but nobody knows, nobody gives a shit. I get this huge clapping and all this, and everybody's going, stand up, and I'm like, I can't stand up, I'm going to fall on my face. And Linda's over, stand up. I can't. She said, stand up. I go, okay. So I lift myself off the drum set, and I'm like this, I'm thinking, God, if this collapses, I'm dead. But it didn't. I sat down, and the star was born. So Linda and I, after that, decided to start a larger band, get more people into the band, and luckily enough, because we were the only lesbians on the scene, we had quite a few other lesbian musicians wanting to join the band. So we got Sherry Jenkins, who I don't know where she was, and she played bass for us, and this woman named Joan Capra, who played the violin. She played the concert violin in Kentucky, and decided to play with our wonderful band. So we called ourselves Family of Women, Lesbian Feminist Musicians. Yes. As far as I know, we're the only group that ever even used that in their name. So we were hot shit, babes. We were hot shit. We started touring around the Midwest in '72. The problem was we didn't get any money, and we never got money. Women musicians at that time didn't get any money for anything. So we had this woman named Joan Nixon who loved the band. Thank you. And she gave us $7,000. And I thought, praise the Lord, if there is a Lord. Anyway, so we bought a van, we bought some equipment, and we Linda, Jonah, and myself were hating each other. We fucking couldn't stand each other. We were so, I mean, you have to understand the times were so hard. You know, it was so hard. We were in CLL, Lesbian Liberation Movement, and we were like on the streets, and it was hard on the streets, it was hard everywhere, and we were trying to present this united front. So Joan and Linda would be hiding the van from each other, telling me, the Libra, you tell her that I'm going to take the van for Saturday night. Well, you tell her I want the van Saturday night. Well, you tell a family of woman. It was hard, but it was great, you know? I mean, it was like the weirdest dichotomy. So then, we were still playing around, and then we get this phone call from Los Angeles. The first lesbian national conference wanted to know if we wanted to play. Fuck, are we lesbians or what? Do we want to play? Of course we want to play. How much? Nothing. Fine, we'll be there. So we decided to put together a little mini tour. We went to Bloomington, Indiana. We went to St. Louis, where we got a whole lot of money. We got $1,000, the most money we ever got, and we headed off to LA. Every city we went to had some struggle, some strife. Iowa City had a class struggle, the women's groups, of course. So we get to California. What is the struggle there? Well, we should not let transsexuals come to a lesbian conference. That's right. We should not let, they're not lesbians. How can they be lesbians? They're transsexuals. No, we should let them in. They're women. We want women. We want to play. Fuck this shit. We want to play, okay? So we get on. Kate Millett was there. Robin Morgan was there. All the big time women there. They were using up the time. We get on Friday night at 11:30. We start to play. We're playing 15 minutes. A woman comes out. Okay, time's up. I said, wait a minute. Time's up? What do you mean? Yes, we have to unplug everything. We have to be out by midnight. I said, wait a minute, woman. We traveled 2,500 miles for nothing to come here to play for 15 minutes? Something's wrong. So the next day, we go to the massive auditorium. We say, Linda goes up and does her eloquent speech. You know, how can this happen? We are lesbians, we are women, we are here, we have come all this way. Please, oh please, oh please, can't you do something about it? So of course, in their kind hearts, they gave us a night to play. So we're playing in this, I mean, there's hundreds of women. I mean, this is before Michigan. There was nothing like this before. And instead of sitting like you are now, they're all dancing in the house and they're on their own. Yes, this is cool. This is really cool. It's a happening thing. Cool, that was the word in those days. So, all of a sudden, the first woman takes off her shirt. I'm going, yes. The second woman takes off her shirt. I'm going, yes, it's a happening thing. It's a happening thing. And pretty soon, I mean, like, we're almost all butt naked, and it's really, like, too much excitement for me to sing. I'm like, my heart is bursting, and I'm dying. I'm lesbian heaven. So, we go over, well, we pass the hat and collect $200. Thank you very much. But it was an experience. It was because we were lesbians, we were spreading the word, and we were there. And in true rock and roll tradition, I threw my drumsticks out. Just like a big man. Threw those drumsticks out. I don't know where they are. 3 years later, a woman comes up to me and says, I had one of your drumsticks. I said, thank you very much. So we came back, and we were riding high. The crest of the family of women was, you know, like peaking. We were like really up there. We were big time. We come back and we're like, I'm gonna kill her. I hate her so much. Ella, tell her I hate her. Okay, Linda, she hates you. Okay, Joan, she hates you. Linda wants to quit. Oh, well, we played one more thing in Michigan, in Minneapolis. The best concert ever, of course. And Linda quits. We had to buy her out $500. Why did we have to buy her out? I don't know. But just like the Moody Blues, we're thinking of a reunion. Thank you very much.
There's a question here. What happened to the family van? She sold it for $1,800. Some of the best minutes of my life were some of the worst too. she's a Chicago poet and a writer. She's coming up here with a big lot of papers. And I don't know what she's going to tell us about, but I know it's going to be good. Please welcome Diane Gomez.
I have a cold, so I don't sound like it. Okay, so I'm a poet, and so I have to read a poem right off. This poem goes, "You hide even from me behind shiny black vinyl and big brassy zippers, and you hope we will forget that beneath that coat you wear smooth and soft black silk. But I remember, and I need the touch of silk." This poem was written by not my first girlfriend, but my first relationship. In the very first issue of Lavender Woman, which we also worked on. Long, long time ago. I actually came out when I was like 14. Didn't really come out until I was 16, so that's the stories I want to tell you. I'll tell you two little stories. Well, the first one was when I was like 16. I had been sleeping with women, like I said, since I was 14, but I wasn't like, out. And so at 16, I fell in love with Sheila Cohen. And she fell in love with me, and we were going to get married with him ever after. So we decided to see if there were other lesbians in the world. Same old thing, right? We were in high school, and so we went to a bar. Now, I don't know what bar it was. I don't know the name of the bar. I mean, I was like really nervous. I was 16, right? And shy. And young. And I went to this bar, and like I said, I don't know the name of it. I can remember this bar. The front was looked like straight people just sitting around, in the front area. And you went behind this wall into the back room, and it was all spray painted in neon colors with black lights and stuff. Does that ring a bell with anybody? This is like 1968. Sound familiar? Okay, okay. Well, it scared me. It really scared me. I mean, look at me. I'll answer your first question. Yes, I've been wearing ties since I was 15. Okay, so I'm like, oh, right? But this place scared me. These women were like, for real, mean. They're like, I walked with my girlfriend and like, hold their hand, and I'm really scared and really nervous. And thank God she was 6'1". You know, my next girlfriend after that was 4'11". Anyway, she's 6'1", so I'm holding on to her like, I'm really scared because they had polyester suits. I remember this one that powder blue with the white trim around the edge. It looked like the guy from WKRP, the salesman. Really ugly guys. Anyway, I was really nervous. I gave me very dirty looks. And I was so scared that I did not go back to another bar or any place for 2 years. I mean, it really unnerved me a lot. I didn't know if that's what I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. So, we hung out and we slept with everybody slept with each other. It was like a whole group of us in high school. We just took turns. Oh, my turn. But the next time I came out was 2 years later. Okay, I was 18, right? And the second coming. So, I was in college. I was picking up some classes at Luke College, and I had a little student board and stuff. And they said there was going to be lesbian speaker panel. I said, I'm going to go. And all three of us showed up and had a really nice time. The panel was bigger than the group that showed up. There was like 3 women who showed up. The panel consisted, this is history right here. It was like Margaret, Miss Sloan herself, and Sarah Thompson, and I don't know if Margaret was there. But Sarah Thompson, Susan Thomas, a woman named Bernie. Remember Bernie? Yeah, Bernie. I remember Bernie. She had face eyes too. And then there was another woman, who I can't remember her name either. And I went to this panel, and I was very taken with them. They said, "You want to go out?" I said, "Sure." They said, "Are you out?" I said, "Oh yeah, sure." And I was really being real confident and stuff. So then I miss Monday night readings, yes. But they were still at what's the street with the tree name? Not Oak, but Elm, right? The Illinois Gay Task Force was still Women's Caucus. Okay, right. So this is the second coming, right? Continuing of the second coming. What happened was I go to my very first meetings Monday night. I walk in my meeting, massive fight. Margaret is screaming at somebody. Mary Peck is screaming back. I mean, Susan Thomas is standing in the corner being very quiet. And just shouting. And then some man came up the stairs and said, can you, keep it down, and, what are you girls doing up here? And we were like, we're leaving. We're leaving now. There was this big battle. And we're like, I had no idea what the hell they were talking about, because I had just walked into my very first meeting. I walked in at the first fight, right? This was my introduction to lesbian politics in Chicago. I knew that this was what life was going to be like from now on, okay? And speaking of this, because I worked on the first 3 issues and that was it. And was going to better hands, actually. But we did leave, we left, and we went and had other meetings. That's when CLL formed. And we went to the church. We had meetings there on Monday nights, and then everybody flocked to King's Ransom. But then, we started by King Ransom, remember, with the Bradbury. Bradbury from Peterson and Western. Okay? And at this moment in time, I have to make a correction, because people from Hyde Park, they're really, their little isolated place, they think they own the city. Mark IV was not in Hyde Park, okay? He was on 76 and Cottage Grove, okay? He was in my neighborhood on the south side, okay? Thank you very much. And by the way, I lived in that bar, so I was there all the time, because, I was like, where's Simpson? Yeah. Okay. Here I tell you my first experience, and now they hung out at this other bar, and she's right, they're very tough, they're very, 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 these girls had yeah, what are you doing, my lady, It's like, I thought she was playing with Chi-Chi herself. So at this time, I have all these goody things. See, this is the reason I read the poem, and this is the reason I brought all this stuff. I've been getting really nostalgic and thinking about things in the past, right? Especially after I got the phone call. And Sharon was a bigger pack rat than me. Okay, she saved everything. And when she moved to California, by the way, Sharon and I lived together for 8 years. We were very, very good friends. We're still very good friends. I just saw her. And maybe you might know her. Anybody here go to Michigan? You see the wonderful belly dancer on the acoustic stage? That's Sharon. That's Sharon. That's the wonderful Sharon. Hey, Richie. Okay. So, she used to save all this stuff. And it's really, really big stuff. I mean, I have, the first 3 years of Ms. Issue number 1, preview issue, and issue number 1 through all kinds of incredible journals. I just had to read you some of this stuff. This is what it gets me. But while I'm doing this, I have a surprise guest speaker, but we're going to get to her in a second too. What I'm going to do this time, see, as I was telling you, I'm being nostalgic. There's several reasons I'm being nostalgic. Not only the question, not only the stories, and thinking about the past, but I'm involved with somebody much younger than myself. And it's making me think about these kinds of relationships. So right now, I want to ask you a few questions. Okay, I want to ask you 3 questions, and then you can raise your hands. How many people in this room came out between the years 1965 to 1973? 65 to 73 came out. Interesting. Okay, and here's the other one. How many people were born between 1965 and 73? Okay. Very, very, very interesting. Now, I'm getting to the point here. Okay, so how many have, now, here's a good question. How many of you have lovers who are 8 years or more younger than you? Very interesting. Okay, so what do you talk about? This is a serious question. And to answer that question, I have my surprise guest visitor here. This is the wonderful Beth Cannon, my good friend Beth Cannon, who's going to answer that question for us. What do you talk about? I wanted to read some of these titles while she's like waiting. I was supposed to read them when she's coming out, so. But I had to read you some of these. Anybody watch tennis today? Navratilova lost to Senis. I mean, she didn't just lose, she got whipped. She got her butt whipped. 34-17. Did anybody see the pre-match with Selis and Capriati? Man, 17 and 14, those girls were kicking. Boom, hit that ball hard. Anyway, here's a good one. This is from 1975 May. Tennis. Why are they going there? Martina Navratilova, next tennis superstar. Okay. This is a great magazine. I know it was one of the best magazines that existed. It was called Women's Sports. I'm going to leave these on the table afterwards. You can look at them too, because I think it was really great. Look at this face. You got to look at this face. This is Billie Jean King in 1975. Okay? I love it. Listen to this caption. Billie Jean King, Wimbledon. Will she or won't she? This one, I think this is significant because it's the first time I ever saw a lesbian on the cover of a magazine, not the middle one, but this is Miss Joan Joyce, there you go. Softball great, remember? Fast pitch, women's champion, struck out men just to show that she could. Do you remember it? Great lesbian, famous lesbian here. I love this one too because this is the only time I ever saw a black woman in a football uniform on the cover of a national magazine. Okay, this was a good magazine. A lot of things were happening in 1972, and I was amazed at the amount of information and the amount of things we had to read. Okay, and that goes back to the question. So, what do you have to talk about?
Well, when we started talking, we actually talked about what's butch, femme, and drag, because I had gradually becoming aware that I was being perceived as being really butch, which is not how I ever thought of myself at all. So I was questioning that, and being a performance artist, no other performance artists wanted to talk about it, or lesbian issues. So I found the one in Chicago that did, and we gradually started going out. And what amazes me about this is that things that I really took for granted when I came out. You know, I grew up in rural Illinois, but I didn't think I was the only lesbian. I might have been the only one in the town I lived in, but I knew where they were, and I went there as soon as I could. And all I was interested in was finding a woman to go out with. I was not discriminate about it. I didn't care. It was like, that was my mission. And, you know, my girlfriend, she can't be like that. You know, she can't be indiscriminate about who she goes out with. She didn't, it was all party girls. You know, I was in the animal bar scene, you know, Swan Club and Ladybug and that group, and we just partied all the time and slept with each other. That was it. That's all we thought about. And she has to think about AIDS, and it has always had to. It's like these issues have never not existed for her. And the other thing that I found really amazing was that feminism and separatism have also never not existed for her and for her age group. So she's much more informed about that than I am. You know, she went to school and they were actually teaching it by that time, instead of having to dig around in libraries and bookstores where you might be able to find a little piece of information about it. So she's taught me a lot that way. I'm 33 and she is 25. We've been together 2 years, so it's been going on a while. You know, so I think it's really interesting that I'm finally old enough to go out with someone younger than me. So, you know, that's what we talk about.
It's very true. I find it to be the same, that things are givens for my younger lover that weren't for me. And as I said, as I was looking at this information, I was amazed at how much information we have. But the other thing is that we got it. We did the work. okay? And we dug it up and put it in magazines. The amount of magazines I have is unbelievable. I mean, I have magazines from St. Louis, from New York, from other places in Missouri. I have magazines from everywhere, and they're all from like 1972 to 77. An incredible time with an incredible amount of information. So, that's it. Thank you.
Who's doing those books over there on that table? Because somebody told me when we were setting up that they were for sale, and I got a customer for you, but I don't know who they are. On the table behind the video right there.
It's mine.
No, these ones over here on the head. Coffee house? Coffee house. You've been starting to hear a lot of initials get thrown around. Let me just explain a couple things real fast. CLL, very important acronym, stood for Chicago Lesbian Liberation. You remember, huh? Yeah. It was around for a while. Some other thing, you'll hear about it. Faye Robinson lived in Hyde Park in the late 60s and 1970s, and she's been around for a while. Faye Robinson.
This is really fantastic here tonight. The problem it's creating for me, though, is I'm remembering all kinds of new stories, and more stories, and more stories. I'm going to talk a lot about what the women before me were just talking about in terms of the Lavender Woman and Hyde Park and CLL and etc. But first I want to talk about, coming out, well, being a teenager and all the sexual encounters that I did have. And people talk about feeling they're the only one. Well, there was no thought. There were no words. It just happened. It was more of a recollection that these things happened than when it was happening that I was really participating in it. There was no real consciousness. So I get to be in my early 20s, and I'm on the north side of Chicago yet, having some sexual experiences with women around alcohol, that kind of carousing around. Presumably straight people, I'm straight at this time. I'm not even conscious of what I am, I'm just sort of there. And so while these women are working on Lavender Woman and Women's Caucus, and these seeds are happening, I'm talking to this guy. I've been sleeping with this woman for a while. I don't know anything about lesbianism or lesbians. And I'm talking to this guy, and he makes a reference to this woman. Oh, do you know she's a lesbian? And it was like, I was just euphoric. Because now I had a word, my whole life started to make sense. And then I immediately began my search, I guess, for community. I may have started to hear about gay liberation and women's liberation, because this was like in the late 60s. Eventually I found myself living in Hyde Park, and I go to this bookstore. This is a straight bookstore in Hyde Park in Parker Square. And I see this issue, this newspaper, it's the only one left sitting on the shelf. Okay? So I grab it, and I'm reading it, and on the back of it, there's this little blurb. It says Southside gay women coming together for discussion and study groups. Call 285-0093 for further information. That turned out to be Bernita Gray's telephone number. And she was at the top of the stairs when I, went up to a friend of hers, her lover there. And so all the things that they were talking about, that Bernita was talking about with Mikkel and their life and all of the activities, they were like creating the community that I was going to be entering. They were the door. This newspaper was the door. The work that Diane was doing, just that all of them were doing, was just how I found my way out here. And that was the purpose of the newspaper. They talk about it, Mikkel talks about it in her book, about it being a way to build community, and it happened. Well, we met in August of 72.
That was when the rap group started, the CR group, consciousness raising group, whatever it was. Consciousness raising. And I was going through, in preparation for tonight, going through my old issues of Lavender Woman, and then with what Mikhail had here tonight, I found out the dates that we started a coffee house then in Hyde Park. It sort of came out of, I think, of the CR group we were talking, and the Blue Gargoyle, the men had a coffee house there, and we took it over on a Friday night, and it was the January '73 issue of Lavender Woman that first carried it. And it just announced that there was a coffee house for women. First Friday of the month is Women's Night. And I remember us going over there, we would lug my little portable Fisher stereo, bring our records, Motown, whatever we could find. And it was a lot, it was fun, but it was the beginnings of community then, and that went on for a couple of years, and in '74 Mountain Moving started on the north side, and I think we just sort of slipped into that and started coming north for Mountain Moving at Wicca. We may have overlapped for a while. That was all, and what's going on here tonight, and earlier when Pat McComb was talking about the demonstrations and the picking of CK and Augie's, the Mountain Moving Coffeehouse participated in those pickets. I was on the collective at that time, we were involved. I remember us going over there after Coffeehouse on a Saturday night. So it just all sort of built together, and it was wonderful fun. Has been wonderful fun and still is. And I think that's my story, because I could go on and on with different little vignettes of things that have happened. And I just hope we do this again, because there are a lot of stories that haven't been told. And Mikhail's going to, I think by the end, give us a list of things we haven't even touched on that happened in this community. So thanks a lot.
So now I bet you're wondering about the history of Mountain Moving Coffeehouse, right? Sure. Well, you'll hear about it later. But now I present to you Sue Gaynor, who's been active in the community since 1974, and she's been on Mountain Moving Coffeehouse since 1978, and she's going to talk about some of the alphabet soup, I think. And Sue Gaynor.
I know it's running late, so I'll try to be short. You've been hearing about CLL, Chicago Lesbian Liberation. Well, I want to share with you their last great hurrah, so to speak. Back in 1975, when the Gay Pride Committee was happening, that's what it was called, the Gay Pride Committee, they were looking for women to work with them. The only women willing to work with them were women from CLL. However, the Gay Pride Committee was meeting on Monday nights, and they weren't willing to switch the meetings. And the CLL had been meeting on Monday night for years. So we sort of said, fuck you, because you're not willing to work with us, we're not going to work with you. So we held what was the first Lesbian Pride Week only here in Chicago, which I think was just wonderful. We had Maxine Feldman come in and perform for it. We had some speakers, we had activities throughout the whole week happening. The next year, there was a new organization that had formed, LER, which stood for Lesbians for Equal Rights. And the reason they formed was to try and be a very visible and vocal lesbian organization saying, yes, we need to pass the ERA here in Illinois. Coming back from the demonstration in Springfield, we decided then that yes, we should have another Lesbian Pride Week. So in 1976, we had a second Lesbian Pride Week. I think 77 or 78, they finally changed it to Gay and Lesbian Pride Week. So, we really want women to work here. In 1978, April 8th, 1978, there was a very large community meeting for there had been no lesbian center for a couple of years. Lesbian center had closed, lesbian feminist center had closed. And women were looking for things, what can we do? We need something happening here in this town. So there was a women's event happening at the Y downtown. I wasn't there, but a group of women had gotten together and said, yes, it's time for a lesbian center. April 8th, 1978 was the first meeting of LCC, which stood for Lesbian Community Center. Within 6 months, we had a place to be, and that was because of Chicago Women's Graphics Collective. The Chicago Women's Graphics Collective, which did a lot of posters that you may see
that you can unfortunately not find anymore, had rented a double storefront. And we had made arrangements with them. So we rented one half of a storefront. So we had 1/4 of their total space for like 6 months until we could raise enough money. And then we moved the center over on Sheffield and Links Hall. Some of the things that happened out of there, one of the big things that I felt really good about seeing happening was the Black Lesbian Rap Group formed using our space, but outgrew us because so many women were coming. So many women were coming to attend the meetings that they had to find somewhere else, and then they started meeting downtown. And another thing that I'm real proud to say is that when the Lesbian Feminist Center was here, they had started a library called the New Alexandria Library for Lesbian Women. When the center closed, the women that were running the library put it in their home for a while. They left Chicago, and so there was no lesbian library. Well, LCC started a lesbian library, which after the center closed after 4 years, ended up in somebody's basement for a few years. And we had also had some rare first editions, donated by women that were book collectors. And I'm proud to say that the Gerber Hart Library has ended up with, the Lesbian Community Center Library. So you should go see Gerber Hart because they have some rare first editions and some very old periodicals that I know. But it's just sort of a real brief thing that I wanted to share about what was happening around that time.
So it's kind of fun to remember if you all were here. And it's really fun to remember, but I was hearing a lot when I was working on putting this event together with someone that I would talk to, and I would explain what we were doing, and we would say, oh yeah, nostalgia, nostalgia. No, it's not about nostalgia. It is fun to remember, but there's something more important going on here than just the pleasant vanity of reminiscence. It's important to document our stories and what we did because erasure is very real and it's very powerful, and you know that. We have to resist very strongly against that. And all the stories that you're hearing tonight, think about all the stories that we haven't heard. You've figured out now that we're kind of operating in chronological order, and we're into now the period where the feminist movement has affected a lot what's happened in the lesbian community. But I make a mistake when I say the lesbian community because there's a lot of lesbian communities, and we're really just hearing about one of them. It's an important one, but remember that there's a lot more than what we're hearing in this room here. So next I would like to present to you Pat Hoffman. She has 50 years living and 5 years out. She came out on the Winfrey Show in 1987, but that's a story. Here's Pat Hoffman.
Actually, I didn't come out in Oprah. I came out in 86 when I was 45. And it was interesting going through puberty a second time. Reflecting after being out 5 years, I guess I've always been a feminist, and quite possibly I've always been a lesbian. It's just that I've never had a point of reference to work from prior to coming out in 45. And there was, naturally, it wasn't overnight, it kind of led up to it, and I talked to a friend a lot and discussed, as probably many of you did, that I wasn't lesbian, I was probably bisexual. And I just had a difficult time with dealing with the label lesbian. However, being a displaced Chicagoan living in Elgin, whenever I come to Chicago, I have to party. And being a feminist, I've been coming to the coffee house for years before I actually officially accepted the label, because that's what I consider my coming out, is when I officially accepted the label of lesbian and proudly wore it for all to see. So I've been coming to the coffee house, and in fact I've gone to Bloomington a couple of years and remember thinking, well, I'll sit in one of the workshops that said lesbian only because they'd never know the difference anyway. And they didn't, you know, so. But in 86, I was 45 years old. I just turned 45 in July. And the first weekend of August, I was in Chicago doing a massage thing. I was going to the Chicago School of Massage Therapy. I was coming close to graduation, and we had something that weekend to do. And so I made arrangements with a fellow massage therapist to stay at her place so I could be close to the action. And I didn't know what to do when I had my motorcycle. I'd been riding for some years. And I had my leather, as I mentioned on the Oprah show, because that's appropriate wear, you know, for motorcycles. And I looked through a newspaper and I found comedy shops and movies. It was a toss-up what to do that night. So I went to a movie called Desert Hearts that I remembered being advertised in the paper as a story about a love story between women. And I figured, well, I've read about it and I've discussed it, so I figured I'd go to a movie and see what it's all about. And so it was playing in a theater on Michigan Avenue, and I don't remember the name of the theater. Fine Arts. And so nice thing about a bike is you park it anywhere. So I parked the bike and walked into the theater, like I said, to some friends, straight as a stick. And I watched the movie in the fetal position. And when it was over, I got on my bike and said I had to find a woman. So I found the Windy City Times newspaper. As I said, I'd been coming to the coffee house, so I knew there were those papers around. But trying to find one that night was a little difficult, but I was lucky. I found one. And I went through the pages and I found a section that lists all the bars. And it gave them categories, you know, women's, dance, etc. So I started at the top, and Augie and CK's was the first lesbian bar I ever entered at 45 years old. So I pulled my motorcycle up, parked it, and went into CK's and proceeded to strip off the leather, which has always been one of my favorite things to do these days. And wondering what the heck to do, because here I am intent on finding a woman so I could, you know, further determine what this is I'm feeling. And I asked a couple women to dance, and I was really at a loss of what to do. And the time was passing, and I was getting tired and was getting discouraged. So I put my leather back on, and I decided I'll just go home and try for a night. And as I was walking out the door, as fate would have it, a motorcyclist was walking in. Fine-looking woman. It's a phrase I've used a lot in these past 5 years. Fine-looking woman. And I was the only biker in the place. My bike was parked right out in front, and she said, "Is that your bike?" I said, "That's my bike, yes." She said she's a biker too, but hers was laid up, poor thing. I said, "Well, it's an August night. How'd you like to go for a ride?" She said, "Sure." So I went over to her place because she had a helmet. It was great. Futon on the floor at the window, sparsely furnished, and so she got her helmet, and I proceeded to give her a ride on my 500, and she's got this big old BMW, and she's been riding for 8 years. So I take her down the Outer Drive, my favorite spot to ride. And this woman who's been riding for 8 years, she's got her hands on my waist. And she doesn't need to hold on, I'm sure, because I'm not a bad rider. And so we did a southbound ride, heading back north, and coming up to Broadway, so I'm going to pull off, and she says to me, how would you like some company tonight? Thank you, Mother. was honored, but she did tell me that she had recently broken up and she was not looking for a relationship. She just needed to be with someone tonight. And I would have promised her my left arm, my right arm, anything. No problems, once, tonight, no problem, So I didn't sleep all that night. It was great. And I refer to it as 4 hours of heaven. It could have been more, but who counts, And it came time to leave because I had to do this massage thing that I was in town.